What up guys, your boy Coftis, and we're back with another one. Now today we're going over my all-time favorite build, which is the Whirlwind build, and we are using the bleed variant of this build. I still personally love this build. Now I've messed with every build as far as you can for a Barbarian. I think the Hoda build is a very strong and heavy hitting build. Very fun, but very slow. And I love the Ren build just because the Ren does so well in single target. I think Ren's at its best for PvP. This is also very good at PvP just because you move extremely fast and not anybody can get away from you. You can definitely run down people on their horses. And on top of you doing high bursty damage, you're putting a big bleed on somebody, and that ticks for a lot. I've had upwards of 175k per tick on bleed. Now what you were just watching was us in the Blind Burrows. That's a World Tier 4. I just wanted to show you what you can do in a normal World Tier 4 dungeon. You can just speed farm if you're trying to get XP or level up your friends. I've been leveling up my friends a lot. I've leveled up so many of my friends just with this build, and it's worked very fast. That's why I haven't been on in a while, just because I've just, been playing the game and not making content. What you're currently watching right now is a Nightmare Dungeon 58 to be specific, and we're just showing how tanky enemies are, yet this build still does very, very well. And you can see we're not getting one shot. Now, I had to switch some things around because I've been doing 60s to 70s, and this build will definitely do 70 plus if you want, but you have to switch a lot of things around to be able to make it a lot tankier, mainly because when 70 plus or higher, I'm getting one shot all the time. It doesn't matter what I do, so I need to switch some more things around in the future and see what can really make this build go a lot further. But if you're someone that's just casually playing, you're probably not going to go over 50 or 60, and that's where this build really sets in and sings. You could definitely take this to 70 like I said, but you're going to have to play a little bit more patient. Alright guys, sorry for the long intro. I just wanted to show what this build could do, so let's go ahead and get into what actually makes this build work. Alright guys, not much has changed. We're still running Lunging Strikes. I have 1 point in each, and then obviously this is a Whirlwind build. I went Furious Whirlwind. I feel like it works the best. If you want to try this out, go for it, but the way the build's set up, this works much better. You get more DPS out of it. We're still taking Pressure Point for the vulnerability, just so we can have 20% more damage. Moving down, we're taking 5 out of 5 Rallying Cry, and we wanted the Tact Cry. I feel like it is the best for this. Now, if you want to be a little bit tankier, I would suggest running Strategic Cry just for Fortify, but we have the tankiness right here of Challenging Shout, and we brought it all the way down here for Tact Challenging Shout, just to have more fury when we're active with Challenging Shout. Moving down, Warcry 111. If you want to have more damage, I would get rid of this and put a point here. I just feel like this works the best because we're still getting a 12% increase based off this down here, but I'll go over that in a second. 3 out of 3 Booming Voice for the cooldowns, and then 3 out of 3 for Raid Leader for health per second, and then we put 1 point here just to get to here, just so we can have more fury generation while we're berserking. We're berserking quite a bit with this build. Now, I did have 3 out of 3 here, but I moved those points to swiftness. You don't have to have these points in the swiftness if you don't want. I like to move fast, so it's completely up to you. You guys can put this either here to have more reduction to damage, or you can put them up here just to have more health if you're looking to be tanky, or you can put them back where I had in the last video just so you can do a little bit more bleed damage to vulnerable targets. It's really up to you. We still have 3 out of 3 in Pit Fighter just for more damage. It's a no-brainer. And then 1 point here for a CC, just so we can have more damage modifiers based off our CCs. 1 point here just to get to here. Like I said earlier, we're getting 12% increased damage anytime we're fortified, and we're fortified pretty much 99% of the time that we're running this build. Moving down, now I have 3 points in here. I have a piece of gear that allows me to have 6. This is a lot of DPS. You don't need this. If you want to move these 3 points anywhere else, you can. Go for it. I still feel like this is the best ultimate for Whirlwind. You probably shouldn't run anything else. If you want to, you can, but this one just outperforms all of them as far as a Whirlwind build. Moving down, still taking on Brow Rage. I feel like it's the best out of the 4. You don't have to run this if you don't want to. If you are very fury hungry, I highly suggest Unconstrained, just like I said in the last video. Alright guys, getting into it, not much has changed. The only thing that has changed from the last video is I got rid of Exploit and I moved Territorial here just to have more damage to close enemies. That is a huge modifier. You should definitely be running this on your gear or anything that you can. Always run damage to close enemies if you're a melee build. This is the tree. Not much has changed from the last video. Moving on, we went into Weapon Master. The Weapon Master is really nice to have just because it gives more damage to elites, you get more physical damage, and you get more resistances. And we have Marshal here. Marshal is huge. You should always be running Marshal. It doesn't matter what your build is. If you're a Barbarian, run Marshal. But this is the tree. Let's go ahead and look at it. Moving in, we went into Warbringer. Now, Warbringer is amazing with any build. I feel like you should always be trying to run Warbringer just because it allows allows you to have Fortify, and Fortify allows us to be tankier, and we have things that allow us to do more damage while we're fortified and or healthy. Now I have Wrath here. Wrath allows us to have more critical strike damage. If you want to put something else here, you can. I like the big crit strikes. It's completely up to you. Anytime we critically strike, we get 3 Fury out of it. So we're constantly getting Fury back, you know, just like we have over here. And of course, physical damage through here. Moving on up, we took Decimator. Decimator is really nice. Down here we have vulnerable damage. Up here we have more vulnerable damage, and then it allows us to have damage reduction from vulnerable targets. So that's really nice since this whole build is around making enemies vulnerable. And we took Imbiber here. This allows us to have 106% more damage while healthy, and we should always be healthy because we should always be fortified based on this and other pieces of gear that I'll go over later. Moving over, I took Bonebreaker. Now, Bonebreaker is really nice to have, and the only reason we really took it is just to get more of this, more tankiness out of this, and there's more dexterity nodes here, and this is where we moved Exploit. Exploit allows us to have more vulnerable damage, so this is really nice to have. Moving down, we took Flawless Technique. Now, Flawless Technique is a one-handed skill tree, but we went this direction just to get more crit damage and more physical damage, and then on down, we took Disembowel just to have a 10% chance to reduce our cooldowns of our non-ultimate skills. And once again, I took this tree for more tankiness. Originally, I was running Hemorrhage and Blood Rage. The reason I was running this just because it allows us to have more damage to bleeding targets or put more bleed on stuff, so you can actually get more DPS out of this. But when you start going higher in the tiers or higher nightmare dungeons, you're probably going to run these instead just for the tankiness. Alright guys, I'm just quickly going over the gear. This is what we're running on everything. Now, first off, I'm running Iron Blood on this just to give me 20% damage reduction to bleeding enemies. As long as there's 5 enemies around us that are bleeding, we have 20% damage reduction. And then we're running Rage of Hargoth. Now, this is best in slot for any bleed build. I feel like it works very, very well just because anytime we inflict bleeding on elite, it reduces our cooldowns by 1.5. We have up to a 40% chance. I got a 30% chance roll, but that's not that bad. And then, of course, Gore's Devastating Grips. These are best in slot for any Whirlwind build because they're made for the Whirlwind. Anytime that we're done whirlwinding and we explode for 20% of the damage, which is really nice. And then Temerity, I love Temerity just because it allows us to get a barrier based off 80% of our health, and that's why we're running rubies on everything instead of sapphire like in the last video. Show you real quick, this puts a barrier on us, should be around 6k, yeah, 6,300, which is really nice. And we're constantly doing this right before we get into battle, and while we're in battle, we'll just chug a pot just to stay healthy, that way we get more damage. Ghost Walkers, these are no-brainer. I feel like Ghost Walkers are like the best for a whirlwind, the best for pretty much any bar build, but mainly for a whirlwind just because we gain more movement speed and we can move freely through enemies when we're unstoppable. Then Dire Whirlwind, this is a no-brainer. It just helps a lot with whirlwinds. The more we whirlwind, the higher our critical strike chance goes. Edge Master and Berserk Ripping, these are just damage modifiers. I would highly suggest running these on your one-handers if you can get your hands on them. And then of course Limitless Rage. I always run this on a two-hander just because when we're at max fury and getting more points over max fury, we're at 60% more damage, which is really nice. And then I switched this out. I was running this, actually. I was running this just to be able to have more damage to unstoppable targets, but not everything's unstoppable. So I switched this out for more damage reduction or more armor. So we have up to 75% more armor, which will put us over 12k right here, which is very, very nice to have. Always put this on your necklace just because it's a 50% boost. And then of course I'm running Conceited here. Now this allows us to do more damage anytime we're in barrier, and we're always in barrier, so I'm always doing 24% more damage. You don't have to run Conceited here at all. You can actually get rid of this if you want, and I would suggest running this right here just because anytime your shout's active, we get 4 points of fury back per second, which is really nice, and this stacks with all the shouts there. So if you're fury hungry, run this. And then finally, Bold Chieftain. Now I got an okay roll on this. I had better rolls, but I just can't seem to get this to drop that much. But you always want to be running this just because it helps with cooldowns, and we're always in the mix, so our cooldowns are going to be pretty nice. And as far as expertise, I'm still running the two-handed axe just to give us 15% increased damage to vulnerable targets. It is the highest DPS in my opinion. You could definitely run a two-handed sword just to have bigger bleeds. This, if you're running a two-handed maul or a mace, as they call it in this. It's whatever you want, but I highly suggest the axe. And in closing, I just want to show that this build can do a lot of damage in a tier 60 or higher. I chose to do tier 60 for the ending just because I feel like most people that are playing are going to be setting around Nightmare Dungeons 50s or 60s. If you want to go higher with this, you most definitely can. I would switch out a couple things like I said before, but you're still doing some really good damage. If you go back to the footage before, we were still doing up to 1.7 million damage, I think was the highest little burst that we had. And now you're watching some boss fights. Now this thing isn't the best for boss fights. Like I said in the previous video, Whirlwinds added works best with mobs. So if you have like something like the Butcher invade you, you definitely want to kite him over to mobs, and you could do a lot more damage. As far as single target, it's okay. I feel like it's outclassed by the Rin build and the Hoda build, but it still puts out a really good amount of damage, very consistent damage with the bleeds and being able to have burst with the whirlwind and explosion of Gore's devastating grips, as well as being constantly fortified and not having to worry about taking that much damage. As you see, her health bar doesn't really dip down at all, and it's still very easy to fight these bosses. Even though they are much tankier and a little bit slower process, it's still very doable. Alright guys, that pretty much sums it up. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and comment. It helps this channel out a lot and helps me out a lot. In the future, I'm going to continue playing with the Barbarian and making more Barbie builds. Anyways, you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the future. Later guys.